Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined by my co-host, Attorney Sonia Madison. Welcome to a new season of the Roundtable Consult. Our first episode of the season starts in July, so starting all afresh.
I was gonna say, look at you, news to me.
Yeah, you weren't supposed to look surprised. Like you're supposed to look. That's because I do all the work of production and publishing these things, and so.
Hey, I'll let you have it. Continue to do all the
Listen, I,
work.
I don't want it all. I don't want it. I'm like, you take some of it. You make sense. I don't know what I'm doing.
Hey.
You are an attorney. I know exactly. You're an educated woman, educated Black woman.
Yeah,
So,
that's going to be part of the save of democracy because apparently it's not come down to Black women.
yeah, well, it always comes down to Black women. You guys have always saved humanity,
So
whatever it
I know
is.
I've been out, or we've been out for a couple weeks, and I know we've missed a lot. But I mean, first of all, how have you been? Because I just feel like not only is the heat unbearable, but also we just had a flood of decisions. We've got the campaign heating up. We got
Yeah, I was wondering if you were talking about the literal heat or the figurative heat.
Oh, I
So,
mean the literal and figuratively. I mean, but it is hot out here. I think
right.
we had the Peachtree Road Race, which we do here in Atlanta every year, and
Mhm.
they ended up waving a black flag because it was so hot. And it was
Oh,
just
wow.
warning people, hey, this may not be
Yeah.
how you want to spend your morning right now.
Well, I'm actually in South Dakota right now, so it's about 75, 77 degrees right here. And it's much cooler than what I was expecting. I was kind of hoping mid to upper 80s or so, and probably should have checked the weather. So wearing shorts is not an
And the world takes a sign of relief.
option. Yeah, right. I have beautiful legs, I want to Anyhow, I know you've missed really just insulting me, so get it all off your chest right, along with the hair. And so,
So should we start at the end and work our way back, or should we start at the beginning and work our way forward?
well, let's start at the beginning and work forward. I
Uh,
don't know what that actually means, but I presume you're talking about some of the Supreme Court decisions that are have
well, I
come
better say
down.
if we start at the beginning, then let's start first with before Biden and Trump went to debates. It felt like, what did you feel as if Biden had to do and Trump had to do?
Um, I think Biden needed to stay awake.
Our bars are so low. Stay awake.
Or at least appear as if he's awake and answer the question. No, it's I don't know what I had an expectation of Biden. Actually, to be honest with you, Trump did a lot better than I thought that he would. I thought when they shut off the microphones that Trump would not know how to stop talking. And um, he did not answer the questions, many of them as I suspected, but at least he stopped, and didn't keep just rambling on. He kept himself fairly composed for the most part through the debate. And that was a surprise for me because I certainly expected that to be his detriment. Um, I thought that Biden would at least appear as if he was breathing and somewhat cogent. And he did toward the end.
I
He
was
got a
gonna
little
say
bit
he
better.
breathed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he got a little bit better at the end of it, but he really needs to. They need surely when they prepped him, they had him look at some of his facial expression. This is what you look like on
The split screen did not work in his favor.
camera. Not at all. Not at all. It was unfortunate, but that's all they've been talking about since then has been the debate. What was your expectation?
One, I did think it was Biden's to lose. To me, there was no scenario, and still no scenario that in which Trump wins, and only because I cannot give a liar the gold medal. I mean, every time he opened his mouth, it was
Right.
Nothing but a lie. But he said it confidently. And if that's
Yeah.
what people wanted, if they wanted that presentation over the competency, then
So the
yeah,
question is,
he won.
do you want an inarticulate truth or an eloquent lie?
Right. And that was to me exactly what was on the forefront. And that isn't to say that Biden was always truthful. I mean, clearly when he said beat Medicare, we knew that that's not what he meant. And also when he said none of the troops died under his watch, we're like, oh, okay. I mean, we do remember Afghanistan, but hey,
Right.
okay, you were pulling out. We will get under Biden, not Biden, under Trump's plan.
Right.
Um,
I did. I will have to give Trump credit. He was like, I have no idea what he just said. I don't think he even
I know. Then that's when the bully came out. I was like, I mean, Biden did hand over,
does.
did hand over the sugar, and boy, did Trump take the bait when he said that. I don't even know what
That
he
was beautiful. I think Trump gets some points on
but it wasn't as if Trump's faces weren't crazy either. I mean, I
that.
was
Oh,
like, how
right.
many times are we gonna squint and look in the air and ponder like you're truly thinking?
It hurts, doesn't it? It hurts to do that.
So I mean, I was like, this is Biden's to lose. Especially when you look at the rules, they were favored for Biden, and I mean, it was able to come up with the rules. You look
Yeah.
at the platform. I mean, CNN has a history of being a little bit biased towards the Democrats. But I was disappointed. I was wanting more fact checking. I feel
Mm.
like the moderators, well, I understand you wanted to make sure to leave it to debate, and you was probably hoping Biden would, catch some of that. But at the
Right.
same time, you only gave 2 minutes for responses. And so to me, that's hard to make sure to point out someone's lies while
Mm.
still answering the question and in an articulate way. And we know that Biden has a stuttering problem. And we also, even beyond that, like, no one, I didn't expect him to come in like a 50-year-old person. And I say that because
Mm.
that's you. So, I mean, I presume that's still a level of high intellect. Um,
Well, thank you. That's the closest thing to a compliment I've gotten from you all year.
So I mean, it didn't surprise me that he looked like he was frustrated to some degree, and he looked like he really wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how to articulate the words. Like you can
Mm.
tell in looking at Biden that he's thinking a lot, and I can see it getting frustrating for him because he knows, listen, I have to think through what I'm going to say before I say it. I can't just say it.
Yeah.
And so, but I will say, like I said, I was disappointed with the moderators. I mean, especially when Trump just blatantly, I did not sleep with a porn star. Okay, that's where we're going with this. I mean,
Yeah, that's I don't fault the moderators for not checking that stuff. That was all on Joe Biden. That was I mean they tossed him he tossed him softballs there, and every time he had a swing and a miss. So that's what Joe Biden should have been doing. If the moderators had been fact checking too much Donald Trump, it would have
Biden would have never talked.
appeared. Right,
Before
exactly.
you speak, Biden, Trump actually the deficit
Right.
is highest under your administration.
Right. They were not conducting an interview with Donald Trump. And so had they been conducting an interview with Donald Trump, then I would have expected them to correct and fact check more of that. Now, by the same token, and I just heard some of the commentators mentioning some of the detriment or the downside of always fact checking your opponent is that you're always it seems like you're on the defensive at some point. You're always talking about what this person is lying about. You're fact checking them, and then you never get your policy issues out, your affirmative points out. And so, yeah, you should have done some of it. I knew that he was going to, and they knew that Donald Trump was going to get up there and tell some blatant lies. He should have at least been prepared to and able to correct those lies, or at least point them out as lies.
I'm not saying you have to do it in a way that you stop and go on the lecture. There's nothing more than a quick, just so we know that the Wall Street Journal did report that, or just so you know, you were convicted
Mm.
related to your indiscretionary infidelity another person, or just so we COVID did happen under your watch, but Biden, what would be your response? I mean, it to me is, I'm not saying you have to then take the place of Biden, but just a little quick insert. Because again, I guess for me, you're still a journalist. And if there's a responsibility at all to the media and to journalism to make sure that you are informing the news, then don't let certain lies. I mean, again, I'm not saying Biden was always truthfully very. He definitely stressed the truth on some things, but I'm just like, okay, come on, some of these are just blatant lies. Like, come on, Jake Tapper, come on, Dana. Are
But
we really
yeah,
just are
no,
we really just gonna like, okay, thank you, Trump, Biden, and not say nothing?
yeah,
But nonetheless, that's why I know a lot of people are saying, oh, Trump won, Trump killed him. Like, he lied. Like, I can't give someone credit for being able to eloquently continue a lie. And I mean, I don't want that as my leader either. Like, I can't, I can't. But I
it's
did like VP Kamala Harris' response, because Anderson Cooper really was trying to get her to just kind of backtrack on Biden, and she was like, listen, I'm not going to sit here and spend the entire time talking about 90 minutes when we can talk about the past 3 years. We can compare two administrations. And that to me is what I feel like the American people really should be focused on. This is the first time we've got two administrations that we can look at and see, okay, which administration is working more so towards your interests. And it's a lot of, some of the supporters have come out and been like, hey, listen, when I'm voting for Biden, I really am voting for his council, his administration. I'm really voting for all the trusted advisors and people surrounding him.
I'm voting for Kamala
and, and,
because she will be leading the presidency
and we know she could
for the
kill
4 years
Trump
ago.
in a debate any day, all day. Although we also know Trump will revert to bullying and name talking if he were to debate her. Um,
Yeah, I watched some of Kamala's when she's pushed. You start seeing some of that black woman come out of her, that angry black woman. I'm like,
First of
oh,
all, that is Mark's comments. I do not
that
support
is it is true.
any
But
stereotype against Black women relating to
listen,
that
it's
is on
and the
Mark.
reason, and that's not derogatory. I'm just saying that we're very expressionate in our speech a lot of times, and this was something that I had to learn even
And
through
what's
my
so hard?
PhD
Did you
study.
not watch the insurrection? Did you miss
Well,
January 6th and how expression, or did the
no,
whole time during COVID when
I'm
they said,
talking
how
about.
dare you tell me I can't wear a mask? I
See
mean, what
that right there? See that right there? All of that
but
right there.
that's my problem. And we gotta be honest about how the media is reporting things too.
We got to be honest about how media is reporting things, but we also have to be honest that we are a minority in a majority country whose cultural and their dialects and their interactions mean something totally different than, I mean, they conduct themselves in a different way than we do. Me and my brothers can be in a heated argument and we can be talking loud and yelling and everything. And certain cultures look at that and say, oh my God, somebody's about to be shot, and they were like, whatever, this is us talking. It's just the
Yeah,
way
but
that
I
we
don't feel
talk.
like American culture thinks that, because again, you talk to people overseas and you hear them say, "Yeah, women in America, y'all don't submit," and they say women in general, not any
They
particular
do.
place.
They do.
And they also again talk about how we are entitled as an American people. They don't like us coming over there sometimes because we're not as considerate of their culture. So again, I mean, I feel like even when you're talking about Black Americans, I feel like we are probably more Americanized in our culture
We
than
are.
any,
I agree. I don't
and
disagree
so
that. I
to
don't
say
disagree
that,
with
oh,
that.
well, we're a minority and that's why we're so expression. I'm like, no, we're American people, and that's
No,
probably why have so much expression.
no, we're still as a people, we generally are much more expressionate than I think white people are.
I
And
disagree, but go ahead. I
and
just
and when I say that, we talk a lot more with our hands and our facial
have you seen
gestures. A
Donald
lot
Trump?
of the I mean, granted, you can point out individual
Oh, but,
examples, but
but
I'm
but
just
that's the
talking about
problem,
in
is that
general.
is our lead. That was our leader, and so to say that, oh, individuals, well, that was an example of someone that we voted as American people to then lead us. So I
To
mean,
who you said?
we as American people did vote Donald Trump into office. Now,
Oh
I mean,
yeah, but
I'm ashamed to say it, but yes, we did. And so, to say that, oh, well, you're picking out people. Well, that was the leader that we picked out. And
yeah,
apparently people
but
related to that
you
level of
know as
expression.
well as I know that when a certain gesture comes from a black person, it is perceived as more threatening than it is when that same gesture comes from a white person.
But why is it
And
perceived more threatening? Don't put it on us. It's perceived
because
because
that's
of our gender.
I'm not
No,
saying the
it's
problem is
perceived
ours.
because
I'm not
people
saying that the
already
problem
are
is
looking for a
ours.
reason to find something negative.
Exactly. So if you know that's what they're going to do, then you adjust your behavior. Here's the example. I when I did my PhD dissertation, the first time I defended it, or at least presented to my committee to try to be finished with my work, I knew my stuff. I was on top of my stuff, and any question that they came brought to me, I was readily able to answer it. And they deliberated for a long time, and then they came back in and said, "We think you need to do more work." And after the conversation, my PhD advisor was saying, I think the biggest problem was you and the way it was the way that you were obviously confident in what you were doing, and it came off kind of cocky, and it was almost like, yeah, duh, almost that kind of thing. And he said, honestly, when we were talking to you, I thought you were going to flip the table over. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, why would you think that? You've been working with me now for 3 years. Why would anything that I say or do cause you to think that? Have I ever behaved that way before over the 3 years that you had? No, I haven't. But what happened was I realized in that moment that my delivery style was a little bit different than what they were expecting and what they were comfortable with coming from potentially the main reason why it was they were uncomfortable was because it was coming from a black man. And so they would be much more readily threatened from those same responses coming from a black man than they would have come from a white man. Is it right? I don't think so. Is it
You
fair?
just presented
Absolutely
a
not. But
different
this is the society
scenario.
we live
That's
in. Huh?
not the scenario that we're talking about. You're
But
saying us
no,
as
I'm
Black
saying
people have a level of expression that is distinct and different from white people. And that your example is not
no,
that at
I'm not
all.
saying it's
To
distinct
me,
from
that is an
it
example of
is
white people putting stereotypes on you undeservedly. Because
no.
again, and as someone who's in the legal profession, I've seen white people and someone who even watches these trials, I've seen white people be equally, if not even more, entitled and expressive. So to
No
say that that
question.
is distinct to us, I'm just like, that is completely
No
wrong. That
question about it.
stereotype
No
can come.
question about it. But you do know, and maybe it's a stereotype, but stereotypes have some element of truth in them. That's why they were developed.
Well, we're gonna have
All
to get into it because
the head movements and
the
all this other stuff
stereotype
like
of
this.
we're lazy and yet we built this country for free.
Well, I'm not talking about
I'm
that stuff,
not
but
going. I'm not going on that. I'm not going on that.
you do know that there is a stereotype about black women talking like this and always moving their
And
heads and
I
moving
also
their
see
hands and
white
all this
women
other
do
kind
that
of stuff.
too. So I'm
And they
saying,
do that.
hey,
And they do
there's
that.
a stereotype
I'm
there
not
because
discounting
there's a
that.
distinction to continue to oppress us. It's not, to me,
I'm
it's not
not.
rooted in truth. It's rooted in oppression.
It's okay. You can call it whatever it is. It still
You're rooting it in
exists.
truth, and I'm saying no. That's where I have to stop drawing the
You
line.
still say that it exists, whether it's rooted in truth or not. The perception persists. And
But then we need to
if the
be combating
perception
that perception.
persists,
We should
if
not
the
dance against
perception
that perception.
if the perception persists and you need to get a positive response from the people who have that perception and you want to get that positive response, then you adjust your behavior to get that positive response. When I wanted to graduate, I adjusted my behavior to get the positive response that I wanted. If Kamala Harris wants positive response from the American people, she should know that she cannot be as expressionate as she might naturally be because it will be interpreted in a derogatory sense.
Well, again, I gotta agree, disagree. I mean, first of all, I did not consider her response any more combative or any more expressive, I should say, than Tara Trump's response. Because, because I mean, granted, she was also quick on the lies. Because what are black jobs, right? That was a specific question. What did he mean by black jobs? And she says, well, I mean, we're just saying that the unemployment rate and the economy. Oh, no, no, no. Be truthful. We know what he meant by black jobs. You be truthful in what he meant by black jobs. But again, that is a stereotype. It is up to us, particularly us as black people, to make sure it is known. Listen, that is the media. That is people who want to continue to oppress us, perpetuating that stereotype. When you look at people, particularly black people, and what they're doing, we are doing jobs, we are doing careers, we are doing anything. That is why the Supreme Court and so many Republican Party people are trying to get rid of any assistance that helped us despite falling behind, because they see that we are excelling. And so to say that, well, I mean, every stereotype has a level of truth. No, no, no. I'm not buying any stereotype that we're lazy. I'm not buying any stereotype that black jobs, in which Donald Trump putting out, is jobs in which we are only doing entry-level labor type work. I'm not buying that at all. Certainly not buying that Kamala Harris is any more expressive than any other politician. I mean, take a look at Jim Jordan sometimes. Take a look at Josh Hawley. Wasn't he the one walking around fist pumping at the January 6th?
Yeah,
so
but
not buying that. So you can stop with all the stereotypes, because to
I'm
me,
just
that is
I can guarantee
perpetuating an
you, I
oppression of
can
us.
guarantee you that when she has her debate council, they're going to advise her, hey, this is the way that this comes off to the American people when they see your black face on a split screen and it's responding and you're responding this way. When they hear your intonation, this is the way it's going to be perceived by the vast majority of, or for a good portion of this majority white country. This is the way that it's going to be perceived. Now, if you're okay with them perceiving it that way and you want to fight the good fight and maybe lose the battle, then go right on ahead and do that. But if you want to win the battle, save the fight for another day and say, okay, this is how I know I need to, in order
No
to be
matter what she
effective.
does, people are going to tear apart. So go out
They
there
are,
and
but there
do
are some
what
things
you
that
know
she
is
can do.
best. And again, to me, she has done debates before. When she debated Joe Biden back during the primaries, people were like, "Oh, I can't believe she came after him when he with the whole busing situation."
Mm-hmm.
No, you do say the facts. I wanted Joe Biden, as we talked about earlier, to come after Trump a little bit more with his lies. I mean, that was the responsibility of you. And so to say, well, Kamala, yeah, if Joe Biden does that, we say, yes, that's your job. But if you do that, oh, you're going to come off combative. Oh, you're going to come off too expressive. No, no,
Be
no,
it right,
no, no,
be it
no.
right or wrong, be it
It
right
is
or wrong.
wrong.
You
You do
have to
need to
know
call a
you have
spade
to
a
know
spade.
your audience. You
You do
have to
need
know
to,
your
and if your
audience.
audience is racist, you cannot cater to a racist, oppressive audience. You still have to. I mean,
If that
that was
audience
the
are the
same
ones who's
thing
going
with
to vote
Hillary.
you in, if
That was
that
the same
audience
thing
is
with
one who's going to
Hillary.
vote you in,
That's the same thing with Hillary. And Hillary won the popular vote, mind you. But that's the same thing with Hillary. Oh, she
we don't
doesn't
say
come off
President Hillary Clinton, do
she doesn't come
we?
off relatable. But
Exactly.
again, that's the point, that to me, then you cannot win as a minority. Because again, if you
That's not
point
true.
out it's just like you said, oh, with
Obama
Biden,
won.
because you just said, oh, with Biden, it was his responsibility to fact check Trump. But if Kamala did it, oh, well, no, Kamala can't do it, because then
I
it's
didn't
going to
say she
come
can
off.
fact. I didn't say
It's gonna, that's what she did with Anderson Cooper. She was like, hey,
I
listen,
didn't say
let's
there was
look
a
at both
problem
of
with the
these
content. I
administrations.
didn't say
Let's look at
anything that
both
there
of
was
these
a problem with the
administrations.
content. The problem that I had was with the delivery. And personally, for me, it wasn't a problem. But
But
I
that's
do
my
know that
problem, is that you think that was a problem. I mean, if
I
you
think
have a
for
reporter constantly, you're trying to get out your points about just two different administrations, and the only thing the reporter is saying, oh, well, what about tonight? Oh, well, what about tonight? Well, okay, we've talked about tonight. Now let's talk about the two administrations. Let's make sure we are not, and that's to me what I have a problem with the media right now. You guys want to focus on this 90 minutes as we don't have two administrations that we can look at. You guys want to focus on this 90 minutes as if we don't have a 34 convicted felon to look at. You guys want to focus on these 90 minutes when the Epstein files have just come out and Trump is all over it. I mean, and yet when we talk about those politicians and we talk about what they put on the forefront, oh, we want to make sure we're protecting our young girls. But yet, this is your candidate. This is your nominee. But we want to focus on 90 minutes with Biden. Come on, media do
You
better.
never want you. So one, it's the journalist's job to get you off your base. That's better for their ratings. That causes them to go down in infamy. Like, did you see how they knocked them off? And that's good for them. That's their job to do that. And if you appear as if they got under your skin, then you have failed because one, your message is going to be lost in your delivery. If your message gets lost because somebody perceived your delivery as defensive, as angry, as put off by some of the things that you say, unless of course you want it to be an intentional, oh, I'm insulted by this. And then you can actually say, I'm insulted by this without actually appearing to be defensive and or angry about it. Because when you have an antagonistic journalist and they get under your skin and it's visible that they get under your skin, then I think you probably have lost some of it, especially if you're trying to make a positive impression, confident representation to the American people. Know your audience, know the impact that any gesture that you have or any words that you use is going to have on those, and do your best to be able to create the best possible response from it. And so Kamala, I think she did good. I like the interview personally, but as I was watching it, if I were critiquing her, that's the one thing that I would say is that she did appear to come off a bit defensive. And I don't think you need to be defensive when you're trying to say, hey, Joe Biden is absolutely on point. I am with him 100%. I've worked with this man for 3.5 years. He is cognitively intact and he is ready to continue to deliver for the American people. You can say that without appearing to be angry.
Yes, if you're a
And
white guy, you can. But apparently, because I
you can
don't
do
think
it.
Kamala
You can
came
do
off
it
defensive.
if you're a
I don't
black
think
person.
Kamala came off defensive at all. I think she came off exactly how you're saying it. She said, "Hey,
Well,
listen, you want to keep talking about those 90 days. I'm going to focus on the two administrations." And
she
to
said,
me, I don't.
and then your eyes get all squinty like this, and they're like, well, listen here, and then you can see what she starts doing her finger, and she's like, I guess I can't point and doing this thing. I was like, okay.
Well, to me,
It,
that's not defensive. That's, hey, reporter, I'm focused
this
on the
kind of
90
thing, when you
days.
start squinting your
I'm
eye,
focused on the 90 days. I mean, not the
this
90,
is
focused on the
this is
administration.
the look of anger when you're squinting your eyes like
I'm
this,
focused
and
on
you're
the
getting.
administration. And
That's
just
fine.
because you can be until you can call it anger, I call it's a disappointment that here we are talking to a journalist who I've answered your question. Now let's talk about the two administrations, and you continue to go back to the question I've already answered. I mean, and
So
so I don't think again, I just disagree.
a viewer asks, how is it different from winning a court case? Do we not try to positively influence the jury? Do you not pay attention if you were litigating? I know you don't do litigation, but in attorneys, when you're litigating, you always have to figure out what is your demeanor and how is your presentation going to be interpreted by that jury. And that jury, in your delivery, you're getting caught up in it, might be the one that causes that jury a
Again, what you
particular
keep
verdict.
on missing is as attorneys, we are there to defend our clients. And so if your argument is, oh, you can't come off as defensive, well, an
It
attorney is going
depends
to
on
defend their clients. And
it
so
depends on how you do
and
it.
that's not, and that's, and again, even when you're talking about in front of a jury, because again, we all do these practices and debates. Yes, you have to bring a level of expression. Can you imagine being monotone talking about a case to a jury? You're going to lose them. But when you look at, going back to the O.J. Simpson trial, I mean, how powerful was, hey, if it doesn't fit, you can't convict. How powerful was Johnny Cochran, just his presence, his demeanor alone, defending his client with lots of expression, with lots of, hey, listen, here, make sure you examine this evidence because again, if you're the prosecution, it's really, and we had a defense attorney on, everything really works in your favor.
I'm not
So
saying
I
that you
don't know
have
if
to have
you
the
want to,
expression of
I
Joe
don't,
Biden. I'm
yes,
not saying that you have to have the expression
yes,
or
you
like
are.
thereof of
You
Joe
over
Biden.
here
No, I'm not.
mocking,
What I'm
mocking
saying, what I'm
everything
saying
Kamala
is that
Harris
you
does.
have to.
And I'm
What I'm
saying
saying,
that's not something that is equally compared and criticized across the board. We do that to our minorities, and it's just a disservice.
so you are not listening to what I'm saying, apparently,
Okay,
because
we agree to disagree. I think I
what
listened
I'm
to what you
saying is
said.
that you can be expressing it without appearing angry.
And again,
And
how you appear angry is going to based on the person looking. And you considered her
this is
angry.
true.
I did not consider
I
her
did.
angry at
I
all.
did.
And so
I
that is
guarantee
again
you.
my
I
point is that
guarantee you there were a lot of
we're launching
Americans who
these.
viewed
I
that
don't
and
doubt it too
said
because
she
that's how they
appeared
view
angry.
black women in
Thank
general.
you.
So then
That's the only point I'm saying. That's the
if
only
you want to
point I'm
follow the
saying.
stereotype of how black women are
I
perceived,
don't want to
yes,
reinforce
you
it.
can see it.
I
You
don't
just
want to
reinforced it.
reinforce it.
You just reinforced it by giving
No,
it
I
any
didn't.
type of validity. You just gave it
If you
validity.
reinforce it, you got millions of Americans who saw that interview with her. I didn't reinforce it with
I didn't hear
the
millions of
notion of
Americans
an
call her
angry.
angry. I heard a black man on this show call her angry,
You
but I
didn't
didn't
have to,
hear millions
and
of
you just
Americans
admitted,
call
and
her
you
on.
just admitted
No,
that
I
you
didn't.
agree. Can we
I
talk
did
one
not
at a
admit that.
time?
I said I don't doubt that that
You
may be
don't doubt
true,
it.
but I didn't agree
Okay.
that that was the
So
truth.
you don't
So
doubt that
listen
it's
to my
okay.
words. Talk
I
about
got you, but
listening.
you don't doubt it.
Listen to my words.
Okay,
I
I
did
hear
not
your words.
say
So let me
that she
use your
came off
words.
as angry. Let me make sure the audience
Okay,
hears me in case Mark doesn't. I
we
didn't
understand
say
that.
she came off angry. In fact,
We
I
understand
don't
that.
think she
But you
came off
don't
angry
doubt.
at all. I'm
But you
saying
don't
there is a
doubt.
stereotype among black women that we are angry. And so any type, as you have said earlier, when you use your hands or have expression, you are going to likely, based on the oppressive nature of this stereotype, people are going to look to then find that stereotype in you. That is what I said. And I'm saying you are perpetuating and giving it validity by saying, oh, yeah, if you squint your eyes, that means you're angry. No, it doesn't. I saw
No,
Trump
I
squint
didn't
his
say
eyes
that means
multiple
I'm not
times
saying
during
I'm
the
saying
debate.
that's
I didn't say he was
perceived.
angry.
I
And
said
you
it's
said, well, if
perceived
you
as
come off with,
angry.
us as minorities, we're a lot more expressive. And so it comes off as a lot more passionate, a lot more, angry and defensive. I'm not agreeing with that stereotype. To me,
You
I
don't
think
have to agree
people,
with
and
it.
I think the American people in general come off expressive and angry and entitled. I mean, that's why I brought in how we are perceived as an American people
Yes,
overseas. But if you want to go into, I mean, I just want to finish my point. If you want to go into perpetuating that stereotype, giving it validity, then that's what you just did on this platform.
one, to acknowledge its existence, one doesn't perpetuate it, and two doesn't give it validity. It's an acknowledgement that this is the way that it's perceived. And you yourself said you don't doubt that other Americans, many potentially millions white Americans, saw that interview and perceived her response to be angry. And if they perceive that response to be angry, it's probably not going to be received as effectively as she and her campaign would like it to have been received. And if that's the case, then she has failed as a representative of that campaign. And so your job, when you go out as a representative of that campaign, is to provide the best defense possible. And if something that you do, whether it's an expression that you use, whether it's a hand gesture, whether it's squinting your eyes, raising your voice, any of those things have a negative impact on that campaign because American people perceive it a certain way, whether it is true or not, but they perceive it that way, then you have failed in your job. And I think she did not do the job, the best service that she could have done
I also
based on
said
her
that no matter
response.
what expression she was going to put off, people were
That's
going to call
possibly
it.
true.
And so then to say that, well,
That's
you said
possibly
that
true.
she came off as angry and blah, blah, she needed to change. I also said that no matter what expression that we did, people were going to find her to be angry. So no, I don't think that you have to continue to cater to racist, oppressive, ideology and beliefs because you're never going to satisfy them. Sorry. You're never going to
But
satisfy them.
well, it's a matter of
But I do
it's a
think
matter
it
of
becomes a
perspective about
responsibility.
how
I
effective
do
you
think
want to
it
be.
becomes a responsibility of the media and a responsibility of our per community, which I consider us to be some of that, not to perpetuate that stereotype or not to give
Again,
it
you keep
validity.
saying perpetuate. I wish you quit using
That's
that
what
word.
I felt like you
I
did.
really wish you would quit using that word because the word perpetuate means to give it validity and to extend
Which
it.
I
No,
believe you
an
did.
acknowledgement of its existence does not perpetuate it. I'm going to say that one more
You
time.
said,
An
"Oh, she came off
acknowledgement
as
of
angry."
its
So
existence
you,
doesn't perpetuate it, nor
you,
does it
that's
give
what
it
you
validity. So,
did.
we'll move on from there. That's fine.
All
But
right.
anyhow, but
So
they have
anyway,
been
did
on
he?
Biden quite a bit.
But then he went to the Waffle House. So, And apparently everyone was like, wait, what was that Biden? Now, there's been reports that are saying, and again, I'm not saying these are true. This is just what I'm the reports that are saying that he doesn't do well after 9 o'clock. And and perhaps his frequent naps weren't as frequent as they needed to be. He had a cold.
Somebody put grandpa to bed. Great grandpa.
He had a cold, a jet lag. It's a medical profession on this podcast. Any validity to, yeah, jet lag can do that to you, or hey, after a certain time, your mind just isn't as sharp as it is at 5 o'clock. Or
When you are an octogenarian, almost anything can throw your cognition off. It really can. And a viral illness is one of the things. A lot of times, people in their 80s, 70s, and 80s, they'll present to the hospital with, you know, confusion and disorientation, and you find out they got a urinary infection. Well, where did that come from? So any type of disorder in the body can really throw you off cognitively for a period of time. So an illness, a viral illness, certainly can do it. Hypoglycemia, if he is hypoglycemic, just fatigue and overload. I think he just had information over. But as I watch Biden, one of the things that's really concerning to me, particularly during that interview, as a medical professional, I was looking at his flat affect, meaning that his face, he really didn't have any expression. I mean, we need to have some expression. So we
did you
just
see
have to.
I'm just kidding. But I heard you say you like the stillness
I mean,
versus
yeah,
the.
no, you need to have some. And I think when your face is too still and you don't have enough, we call that flat faces or flat affect. And those are some of the things that you start wondering: can this person be developing or have Parkinson's disease? And you start seeing some rigidity in their body and some loss of cognition, flat faces, all of these things. That would be the first thing I'd be asking: does this guy have Parkinson's disease? And has he been screened for and tested for Parkinson's? And certainly, I watched him during this interview this past week, yesterday or whatever, the one that with George Stephanopoulos. And it was much more expression in his facial expression. I'm sure they probably coached him to say, hey, you need to act like you're more enthusiastic.
Definitely gave
But
him
if
some
you
color
watch,
too. They gave him some color. I was like, how much bronzer did y'all put on this guy?
hey, it's working for Donald. We have two orange men now running. But even at the what event was that where there was a gospel event and everybody was
Oh, the
moving around and
Juneteenth. Yeah,
clapping?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Juneteenth. And so when he's just like, like robotic almost. And there are already people who think that Joe Biden is AI, and so he probably thinks that he's a robot now. He really is moving around very robotically. Yeah, so those are some of the things medically I would be thinking about. And yeah, granted, 80 years old, it can throw you off almost anything. A small fever can change your cognition. What does that mean? Is that a good excuse for the debate? Or is that an alarm for him carrying on in his duties as president? If even minor things can throw your cognition off, even if for a brief period of time, what does that mean for your fitness for the office for the next 4 years? We can look and see the impact that the stress of being president of the United States has on presidents. There's nobody who goes into that office and comes out looking the same way that they did before. So clearly, it has an impact. Barack Obama went in looking like young black hair, and now he's all white and gray. Same thing with Bill Clinton. And so they've been aged. And when you already go into it aged like that, maybe it's hard to see the difference.
But even
And the
with
only
the
difference you
condition
see is
that
for
you're
cognition.
missing, even with the condition that you're missing as it relates to stillness, does that affect I guess brain competency, or is that really, because I know there's physical and then there's mental. And so
It,
just because, like, people with MS and Parkinson, they still think. I mean, it's not as if their brain just dies.
So it is. So there's a difference between cognition. So you can have some cognitive decline, particularly with some of those other neurodegenerative disorders. But even if you didn't have a cognitive decline, but your expression suggests that you did, then we in that position you have to be mindful that appearance is not everything, but it sure is a heck of a lot.
It's
And
not
I
nothing, I
use this as an example. I use this as an example. Again, still from PhD studies. We would do presentations to the whole department on our research. And we would have people who come in, very brilliant people, but English was a second language to them. And because English was a second language to them, they were not very articulate when they presented their information. And so it was very broken, and you would get the impression that they didn't know what they were talking about or that they were unintelligent. But these people were brilliant people, but they just couldn't express it because they had a defect in their ability to express it, and what we call English being a second language. And so, even when you have some of these neurodegenerative disorders where you have some expressive aphasia, meaning that you can't express an idea. The idea is clean, clear, and cogent in your mind, but you just can't get your lips to cooperate with what your brain is saying. Then people perceive that to be incompetence, even though you may be very cogent. And as a president of the United States of America and a leader of the free world, you have to have the appearance of authority as well as the content of it as well. So
So, do you feel like during that debate he did not appear authoritative, or you just felt like
oh, heck, he appeared lost. He appeared lost completely. Like, where am I? And
I mean, I think he had some points, some moments, because when you let him talk about foreign affairs, and all of a sudden,
right,
you could
right.
tell that's his wheelhouse. I mean, he comes in, he's ready. I mean, even as he unfortunately conflated immigration with what was it, abortion? Nonetheless, I mean, when he talks about immigration and foreign affairs, there is a light in him that just man, okay, we know that's your MO. But again, as a whole, it definitely it was his to lose and he lost it. I'm not gonna dispute that at all.
My belief is this: no president actually makes a decision by him or herself. It just
Exactly.
doesn't happen.
Exactly.
They
Nor
surround
should they,
themselves with
unless you're
with
Trump. But nor should they. Because
exactly, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. But they surround themselves with experts who give them the give them the best possible scenarios. And so the reality is you have to choose between worst case scenarios, like choose between two or three options. And your advisors will more often say, this is the option that we recommend. And you just say yes. But if they say, hey, you got three options here, we can't really say that one of them is better than the other. Then it's a coin toss at that point. Which one am I going to choose? Left or right, heads or tails? And nobody knows that it's going what the outcome is going to be until after you've chosen it. So not you as a president, the most cogent and astute president, or you got demented president, Alzheimer president. Uh, I'll choose this one. And so the reality is that as long as you have enough sense to surround yourselves with the people who are experts in those fields and to take their advice, then you're good at that point because that's what presidents do. Now, the thing that concerns me about Donald Trump is twofold. One, he thinks he knows more than all the experts, and he has said as such. He knows more than the economists, more than the military generals, and he knows more than the
more than
scientists.
Dr. Fauci, right? Yeah. Don't,
Yeah,
don't
he,
drink
he
that
knows more than all of them. And any topic, he knows more about it than anybody. And so when he is given that type of advice, is he willing to take that type of advice from his leaders? So that's the problem first and foremost. And the second one is who are going to be the people who he puts into those positions? And I don't think he's going to put people in those positions who will tell him the truth, Rather, they'll tell him what he wants to hear and say, hey, this is what since you know more than everybody else, I think we should go along with this one. A whole bunch of yes men. And that to me is much more concerning than having a president who may need to take naps in the afternoon
Well,
and may
and
stutter over some of his words.
to also be clear, his former administration, I want to say hardly anyone is willing to come back.
Like
Whereas
40 some odd people or whatever of his administration says, no, we do not endorse
no,
them.
nor are we voting for him. So so that should speak volumes as well. Whereas Biden's administration, they're willing to stay in there and they're willing to come back. So if that means
One of
anything,
them said he's a deeply flawed individual, perhaps the most flawed person I've ever met. I was like, wow. you know, and I do think that people should take note of these things. These are people who have interacted with him on a very close level while he functioned in the office that he's running for right now. And these are the people who told you from a front row seat that he's a very flawed individual and incapable and dangerous to operate in that position. But we don't listen to him because I think I'm reminded of the scripture in the Bible says, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And I think if ever there were a time that we need to consider that same scripture, um, this is probably the time we need to do it. It's like, yeah, don't be looking on the outward appearance. Look at where the heart is, and that's going to really settle it for us.
and for those listening, you don't even have to look at him to try to look into his heart. Just listen to the words. I mean, he's been very clear. I'm going to go after my political enemies. I want to be a dictator. I like how Putin and Kim Jong-un is running things.
Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so,
so
I don't
just
know.
open your ears. We're not asking you to go find an X-ray and see if you can see a heart in there. Just listen and
Maya, was it Maya Angelou who said, "You said when somebody shows you who they are, by all means, believe them." And so he
we're
showed
begging
you,
you, American people, believe him.
believe him. He told you, and he's like, "Listen, this is what's going to happen at this point." Um, so anyhow, what about some of these Supreme Court
Yes. Okay. So
rulings? Let's talk about
speaking
some of
of
these.
Trump saying he knows the law better than anyone, as we know, he went to the Supreme Court saying, "Hey, I have absolute immunity over anything that I've done during my office as president." And just to recap for those that don't know, back in DC, they did file criminal charges against Trump and said, among other things, he made public statements about the administration of the federal election. He communicated with senior Justice Department officials investigating election fraud, about choosing state officials, or about choosing the leadership of the department, communicated with state officials about the administration of the exercise of their official duties with respect to it, and communicated with the vice president and members of Congress about the exercise of their official duties regarding the election certification, authorized or directed others to organize contingent slates of electors in furtherance of his attempts to convince the VP to exercise his official authority in a manner advocated for by President Trump. So in short view, they're talking about, again, he goes to the Justice Department, hey, these electoral votes, this fraud, can we investigate that? He goes to the VP, hey, can you overturn the electoral college vote? He goes to various members in the Justice Department, hey, can we find other electors? And can we take away some of these state electors and bring in our own? So they're really going to, okay, he had a conspiracy to overturn the election. He comes in, he files a motion to dismiss. And for those that don't know, when you file a motion to dismiss, you're essentially saying, hey, let's assume everything in this complaint is true. You still have no claim because I have absolute immunity. And that's essentially what he's saying. Let's say I did everything that you're saying I do. I have absolute immunity because I was acting as president, and as president, you should not try to criminally charge me of anything. So the Supreme Court comes back and says, and I'm going to use some of the language because I know it's been a lot of stuff online saying, oh, they said he has absolute immunity. And I think Chief Justice Roberts tried to say he doesn't while it's still being confusing nonetheless. So he says, we conclude that under our constitutional structure of separations of powers, the nature of the presidential power requires that a former president have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. at least with respect to the president's exercise of his core constitutional powers, which those include, the commanding of armed forces, granting pardons, appointing public ministers, and like, at least as it relates to those constitutional powers, they're saying this immunity must be absolute. As for his remaining official actions, he is also entitled to immunity. But at the current stage of proceedings, it is unsure, or they don't have any understanding if the lower court decided whether or not the immunity is absolute based on, was it an official act under his constitutional powers, or was it an unofficial act? So here are my thoughts, because I know we talked about this before. I'm not surprised, and I feel like I recall saying what the court is likely going to do is try to carve out what this immunity thing is going to look like. I did not think they were going to come back and say, oh, he has absolute immunity, case closed, go take your complaint somewhere else. But what he did come back and say, okay, well, let's first decide, did the act as it relates to his constitutional powers. Now, they don't make the analysis to tell you if they did or not. They say, hey, take it back to the lower court and you guys decide whether or not these were official acts. We did see some concurrent opinions, Justice Barrett in particular, which is surprising.
Concurrent. Okay, yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
concurrent opinion, in which he said, well, I don't think that, trying to find other electoral college members would be considered a official act. So as if to try to put out there, maybe this one is wrong. And even in his majority opinion, the Justice Roberts does say, while some of these may official, I think we all agree that not everything that he did was considered an official act. So I feel like he is still trying to give some room to say, hey, no, he's not out of the clear. It's just a matter of you guys deciding. The problem, though, is this is going to be an inevitable circle, because we know the lower court is likely going to decide, okay, these were not official acts. You are not subject to complete absolute immunity. And unless you can show how this was in the course of exercising constitutional powers, which you do not have the constitutional power to go tell your VP to go overturn an election, then you're going to be in trouble. So, and we know DC is fairly liberal, and so I don't doubt they will come back to the lower courts and say, okay, no, immunity doesn't apply here, so this case proceeds, and this case proceeds. They may throw out a couple of counts here and there, but they're not going to throw out the whole charge. And then we'll be back here. If Trump wins, I don't think it's going to go much further. If he does not win, I think it empowers the DC court to continue on with prosecuting the case. So for everyone that is like, oh, this is allowing Trump to be able to say, all right, I can command the armed forces, go attack Joe Biden. here's the go switch.
Well, I think in their dissenting opinion, they did actually mention that.
They did that
because I forget. So Sotomayor, I think it was,
yep. Mm-hmm.
who said that, and the reason why, and I didn't hear you mention this in the reading there, and that is that any communications with his with the departments over which he supervised, or whatever the executive departments that he spoke is considered an official duty. If you call the Department of Justice and say, hey, can we do this? This is because this communication within the Department of Justice is considered to be part of your official duty. And therefore, that type of information cannot be used against them. It cannot even be admitted into as evidence for that matter. And so it becomes hard to make a case against him, because you cannot include some of the very damning testimony that they've had from the people who were inside the room, who would be the witnesses. You're like, how do you got all your witnesses are now official, where the saying these conversations were according to official duty. And the only way that you can penalize him then at that point is to impeach him. And of course, that's a political process. So,
they tried 3 times. One of the things that, again, to be clear, because again, that's what the dissenting opinion said, is pretty much in any communication. Now, Justice Roberts does make it. He tries to. Again, I think it's a confusing majority opinion. He does make it clear that I'm not saying any communication. you do need to look at the communication. And it's a difference between saying, hey, can I, seeking counsel, advice, and whatever, and calling on an instruction that is beyond your power to do so. So, and that's why I say it's going to be on a loop, because if those evidence or those tapes show that no, he's asking to the Justice Department to commit a crime, then you can argue, well, that's not in your official duties. You cannot go ask them to do something. One, you can't do it because it's not in your powers to do it under the Constitution. So there goes your absolute immunity. But two, you're not seeking counsel, but which is what the Justice Department is for. You're instructing them to do something illegal. And so, but as you also said, and I think this is what's going to be interesting, is if he doesn't win, please, God, please. Please don't have him win. But if he doesn't win, it'll be interesting to see how they apply that. And I think to me, it should be noted, because the way the opinion reads, I mean, as most opinions do, they go into a history lesson. And he makes it seem as if, hey, a president can't work unless he has some immunity. We've never had this problem. So let's keep in mind now, how many years since we had this Constitution, and this hasn't come up. And one of the examples they use, or Justice Roberts uses, the pardon powers. Back when it initially started, Congress wanted to put together a law and say, hey, just because the president pardons you doesn't mean that that act necessarily no longer has consequences. So if you were criminalized and lost your job, lost all kind of stuff, and then you got a pardon, Congress is saying, hey, sorry, you were convicted. That's what happens. Whereas the Supreme Court said, no, we said that statute was unconstitutional, because a pardon is that. No, it means that you are restored back to where you were before. And to me, I'm like, well, that's not a good example here. Yes, president can exercise pardons. Nothing in his exercise of pardon was illegal or was not outside of his official act. You're comparing apples and oranges here.
Right.
So, like I said,
And maybe that's why he specifically pointed to those things that are clearly within the realm of his exercise of his duties. And so, and obviously he's the only one who can do that. And so that's clearly within his range, within the scope of his authority to do. So it'll be interesting what happens after a period of time.
after the election, because again, I think this is, and we've seen subsequent to the sentencing for the New York case, the hush money case has also been delayed, as the judge wants to review the Supreme Court decision and make sure there's no issues related to immunity. If you're asking me, of course, I think that happened before he's president. I mean, he was bribing porn stars before he won. So hopefully there isn't any,
But I think some of the conversations with some of the testimony of Hope Hicks and some of the things that happened after he was president.
Yeah.
Because he made some of the payments after he was president. And so even, making those payments afterwards is.
And then subsequently again, doctoring the books, because that's really what it's about, is fraudulently dock the books. So then that's one. Another decision in our short minute of time, because I know we're running out of time, we got to talk about what people have called the Chevron decision. And for those that don't understand, so Chevron is a reference to a case. So and yes, it is Chevron gas, but it's references to a case. I don't want you to think it's the corporation itself. But it's an old decision, it's precedent that pretty much gives a lot of deference to administrative agencies. So for those that know the type of law I do employment defense. And so I often have to submit various filings to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a federal agency, Department of Labor, which is a federal agency, as well as the National Labor Relations Board, which is a federal agency. And so typically what the rule has been, hey, if a statute is unclear. So say, for example, Title VII Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination in employment, among other things. I don't want to narrow down that quick. But if there's some ambiguity on the interpretation, then there's some deference to the administrative agencies to then interpret accordingly. So one example that immediately comes to mind is sexual orientation. Nothing in the statute itself says that you cannot discriminate against someone based on sexual orientation. But what the EEOC has often done and said, hey, we interpret because of sex to include sexual orientation. And so for a lot of courts, they allow or permitted this deference, where some courts would say, no, statute doesn't say it, so I'm not going to impose it there. So what the Supreme Court has decided to say, yeah, we have this precedent, but let's talk about if we want to overrule it. And he does specifically say, let's talk, and this is Justice Roberts again. He does specifically say, should it be overruled? And then proceeds to overrule it. And one of the things, again, they go through history. One of the things he said, hey, the courts are supposed to be the only people interpreting laws. And while yes, we understand that sometimes, it's a lot of ambiguity. We understand that courts oftentimes can't take on the bulk of every type of question that comes in. We understand that a lot of these agencies were built for this purpose. We still can't allow these agencies to take the place of the court. So now I know a lot of people are, and just for those interested, definitely read those opinions. But just so you guys know, one of the issues that was still in there, and I don't know much about fishermen and fishers' rights and whatever, but there wasn't a federal agency that said, hey, the statute says you have to have what they call an observer relating to how they fish or whatnot. And so the administrative agencies interpret that to mean you have to pay someone to observe. And the people or a lot of these small businesses said, hey, no, we shouldn't have to pay. That's not statutory. And so a lot of courts, I mean, there were some were probably mixed, but for the most part, they were like, well, we're deferring to the agencies. And quite frankly, it makes sense. If we're going to require you to have an observer, okay, that's paid labor. So, but I imagine what they want to do is be able to have dual. So have someone pulling and observing at the same time. So you're not, specifically paying a separate person just to observe. But nonetheless, the court said, no, the agency does not have the authority to mandate that you have to pay someone to do that. That's something that Congress has to have to regulate. And since they have been silent on the issue, the courts should not interpret anything more than just make sure you have an observer there. And so that's where we are with that decision. I know a lot of people feel like, oh man, this is doom. And as a lawyer, I can say, yeah, because
Yeah, it's doom.
yeah, I can see that because one of the things that we try to do is advise our clients the best we can. And so we do look at some of these administrative agency decisions to try to help give the best guidance that we can. And so to now say, oh, they don't mean anything. Okay, well then, you guys are picking and choosing when you want what cases you want to hear. Congress is not passing much of anything outside of, probably more global type things. So then, what how are we going to advise here? And one of the things that even the opinion, and we same people that dissent, of course, just Sotomayor and the like, one of the things that they are saying is, hey, listen, those are the experts. The people that are appointed into these administrative positions or these administrative agencies, they are the best to be able to articulate how best to interpret this. And they're also likely the people that are lobbying these legislators to make these statutes anyways. So, why not defer to the expert? But hey, that's what we are.
Yeah. So I mean, even for that matter, it's the same situation with mifepristone, the abortion pill.
Yeah.
Same thing. The
Mm-hmm.
courts want to now be the ones who make those type of decisions when you're like you don't have the medical expertise to really know what that is, and so. But the problem with I think with that Chevron decision that people had was that it's something like 90% of the time the agency would basically would lean in
Interpret.
favor, interpret it in favor of the worker, and protects the citizen as opposed to the corporations. And so the corporations got to the point where they're like, we're always at a disadvantage every time it goes up to the agency to make that determination. And we understand that the main reason behind this, I was writing my book this past week as well. One of the things that I was looking at was political capitalism. And political capitalism is such where the elite owns, of course, the means of production, but they cooperate with those who create the legislation. They basically jump in bed with those who are making the legislation, so that the tax laws and the regulations and everything are favorable for the corporation, and in turn, the corporations feed more money to those legislators who to give them the benefit that they have. And guess who's excluded from that? Everyday Joe, the citizen. So in this situation, the advocate that we had for the American citizen was the agency. And now I guess the judicial and the legislative branches want to eliminate any advocacy for the citizen in favor of advocating for the corporation. That's what the bottom line is.
And I think that is another misconception. As someone that works with a lot of these agencies, I mean, more likely than not, at least it really pertains to the work I do, they're not harsh towards the corporations. I mean, to me, when I present, if we're talking about discrimination, if we're talking about wages or whatnot, you still have to come with something more than I believe. You do, and employees to some degree, it is hard for them to get those hardcore facts. And so what a lot of these agencies do is say, okay, corporation, give me everything. And they're sifting through. And I mean, if there is nothing there, I've seen them say, hey, sorry, we don't see the calls, but hey, by all means, go to court, do what you got to do. I mean, it's not stopping you from going to court. But I don't want to put the point out that corporations are great. And, when they mess up, those agencies catch it. But I don't want this narrative to be, oh, if you have to go before an agency in your corporation, you automatically lose. No, that's not true either. Yeah. We have seen Donald Trump how many bankruptcies? No, but seriously, and I do agree courts are probably a lot more favorable for corporations because the standard is high for a lot of this stuff, but I don't describe the agencies are completely anti-corporation. It's not true either. So, but nonetheless, I feel like what we talked about constantly, Chief Justice Roberts probably is really trying to get Congress to work. and and so I feel like a lot of times when you read his decisions, he's very consistently says Congress needs to do X. This is the power of Congress. We are just here to interpret. But it is Congress that if they don't like our interpretation, they need to change it. But we know that that's not going to change. And just right quick, oftentimes these agencies follow the administration. So particularly if you look at the National Labor Relations Board, depends on who's in that office will determine what cases they see. and oftentimes when there's a Republican there, it is even more favorable for corporations than us.
Yeah, that's true. Well, good.
So, did we cover the hour?
And then some.
And then some, because I'm sure we didn't get to really talk about his interview yesterday, but you did talk on it a little bit. So do you think you think that was a saving grace? Or you think, he still got to prove himself?
He still has a lot more to do. Unfortunately, right now he's going to be under a huge microscope, and he's going to be under the James Webber telescope, or whatever the thing was called. Not the Hubble, but the new one that they have put out there. That's the telescope he's going to be under, so that they can see things coming light years away, millions of light years away. Any mistake that he makes right now, he's going to be under incredible scrutiny. One of the things that I thought was unfair is that he was asked a question. He said, what would you do or what would you say if when you run that if you lose Donald Trump and Donald Trump wins, would you feel any obligation? And he made a comment. He said, I feel like I will have given it my best shot. And people were dissatisfied with that answer. And I'm like, what else are you supposed to give?
Yeah. Do you want him to do your best shot? No,
what else are you supposed to, what other way are you supposed to respond to this? And then they said, well, and I guess they came at it with the presumption that any candidate would be a better candidate than he was. And I don't think I've heard anybody articulate that point. They say any candidate you put in there could lose. And this is a gamble right now. He could very well be the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. But by the same token, he could be the worst candidate. And so you just don't know. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if he drops out and another candidate runs and loses, then he says, then what would you do? He's like, well, I did the best that I thought that I could have done. You still got the same response. And so I guess that question I thought was a little bit loaded because it went with the assumption that he was not the best candidate to beat Donald Trump. So
Yeah. Well, and I definitely want to hear what you guys as viewers think. I will say to some degree, I didn't like that he kept asking, "Hey, are you sure you can do this? Hey, are you sure you want to stay in this?" Hey, I'm like, George, he said he's staying. But also, I would challenge people that continue to say, "Oh, he needs to step aside." It's too late. It's too late. One. I mean, this is my opinion, but it's too late. One, unless he decides, and to me, and he's got to be the one to say, "I am going to step aside," and it really needs to come from him. But let's not discredit. There were primaries. We knew this guy was not 60. He was overwhelmingly voted in as the nominee based on votes. So let's not discard those votes and let's stand behind him. I'm asking Democrats, be like the Republican mob. Stand behind your candidate.
yeah, but did the American people get a bait and switch type thing? I
And
mean,
I'm like, it's too late. It's weird, too far gone.
would
And to
would
bring
they
in,
have if they saw that Joe Biden there before the primaries, would they still have voted for him
honestly, I
over
think
the
they
other
would have. I really do think they would have. But thankfully, we don't have to talk about that. So,
we got
because again, the people I don't want to discard people's votes. They voted for the guy. They knew how old he was. And to me, perhaps they looked at his administration. And like we said earlier, those people are willing to stand by him again. And even as early as this year, he put in an executive order related to immigration based on a plan that was drafted by a Republican that the Republicans refused to enforce because Trump told them no. So, he is still doing the business of the presidency. Let's not ignore that because he had, what do you call it, a bad episode? Whatever that means.
at 90 minutes. Yeah, let's look at the 3.5 years. Of course, you wanted to look at the 3.5 years, but the problem is that 3.5 years have passed. That's the other problem, and
Well,
you
that's
have
why I brought up
AIDS.
the current executive order. That's what I'm saying. He's still working. And that, I mean, he put in an executive order. That's what I'm saying. And he also alleviated some more student loan debt this year.
Yeah,
So I'm just saying, let's not ignore that.
pandering, pandering.
But
That's what
again,
goes
you
on.
guys, let us know what you think. And I did want us to extend my apologies for last week, and we had a death in the family, so that was why we weren't here. But we missed you guys. Hopefully, you missed us too. Definitely let us know what you guys thought about the show. Let us know what you think about the debates. Is it too late for Biden, or do you see again a path towards success? So until next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Don't forget to catch us on your favorite podcast platform. Also, don't forget to watch us on YouTube. Don't forget to not only follow us here, but also follow us on Star Radio. And ultimately and finally, don't forget to comment because we love hearing what you guys say. So until next Saturday, have a blessed week.